Well, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. This is Michael from Premier Speakers. I've got Brad Casper with me here. Brad is the current CEO of the Phoenix Suns, the NBA basketball team. Thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Michael. Thanks for inviting me.
You've had quite a background. You're at Procter & Gamble for 16 years, and then with the Dial Corporation. How did you end up with the Phoenix Suns?
Well, it was a road that I didn't know I was journeying on, but when I took over as president and CEO of the Dial Corporation, I had literally been on the ground a few days. And in 2005, when the Suns approached me about whether or not I'd like to come see a basketball game, it happened to be a playoff game. And little did I know that it was seduction that's really trying to hook me as both a fan, but also ultimately as a marketing partner and sponsor. And my experience that night was so extraordinary that I said, oh, absolutely, I would love to have the Dial Corporation partner more closely with the Phoenix Suns. So over the course of the next 5.5 years as president and CEO, we, in addition to having a suite at the games, we also began to bring our brands alive in arena and had many different touch points with our fans and friends. And so the franchise got to know me quite a bit in that capacity of both fan and leader. And when unexpectedly last summer, 2011, the president's role here at the Suns became vacant when the incumbent moved to California, I was the first one they turned to, asking if I wanted to jump across the Great Divide. And I can't exactly, for purposes, imitate what I said at the time, but it was something like, hot damn, yes. Interested. And so that started a brief courtship, and I came in October of 2011.
Wow. And so how has, from the retail good world, how has that transferred over? Obviously leadership, there's leadership skills that you're leading a large team. Tell me a little bit about how that has transferred over and what you've learned from transitioning over from major sectors.
Well, I asked, what was it that they thought a part of my resume, part of my backdrop and background would be applicable. And they said that they were immediately attracted to my leadership style, a very inclusive nature of leadership, very hopefully inspirational. And because the NBA was in a lockout at that time, meaning that there was no clear evidence that we were even going to have a season, they were looking for a leader who could rally the troops in the face of uncertainty and keep the business operations really focused forward, even if we didn't know when or if we were play basketball. So leadership was one component. Second of all, they wanted someone who had been successful in business, who understood profit and loss and understood how to manage the assets of a company. So that was another thing that they felt that coming from outside the industry. The managing partner of the Phoenix Suns, Robert Sarver, said he wanted to put together what he thought was the brightest combination of minds. It didn't matter as much to him that we had basketball in our blood or not. He said, I think I can outdo my competition by outthinking them. So I was flattered that he wanted me to be a part of that outthink strategy. But at the bottom line is that they said the Phoenix Suns is a powerful brand. And it is the oldest sports franchise in the state of Arizona. It's probably the most endeared as well by its fan base. But at the same time, they said we need a branding expert to help us promote that brand, market that brand, and ultimately sell more tickets because they thought it was getting a little bit rusty. So I was able to transfer the leadership, the P&L, the marketing, and much of the selling that I've been doing for 25 years in CPG and bring it over into another arena, so to speak.
Well, it's interesting. I read the book when the core values are strategic, and
yes.
If you click below the video, we have more detail on this book, and would be glad to send this out to any meeting planners. But it was interesting how you talked about the tightrope principle, talking about when you transitioned into the Asian market, how you felt like you had the benefit of being an outsider in leadership, and then also having the knowledge how to pull people together. Did you think that it's amazing how that's translated over, it seems, cross industries and cross cultural as well?
Absolutely, and that as part of my interview with the Phoenix Suns ownership group, I used those very examples. I am used to parachuting myself into very unfamiliar situation, and I couldn't find anything more, different than, circa around 1989 when I'm a first-time manager and I'm parachuted into Kobe, Japan, and it was sink or swim there. Up till that time, being at P&G Japan was not always a good career move. A lot of foreigners had come back, I euphemistically say in the book, in body bags because they did not succeed in translating their culture personally and that of the indigenous culture of Japan. So I was successful there, was promoted every 2 years, and over a 6-year period got to the top marketing position in Japan, and then was asked if I would continue my career in Asia by moving to Hong Kong and China. So once again, using that, I do fall back on those skills quite a bit. I'm comfortable with uncertainty. I'm comfortable being in a different culture and then trying to find the win-win between the culture I came from and the one that I'm in. And I'm finding that to be, again, true here at the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, I loved the term you came up with, the cultural chameleon. It was a really interesting read. Your background has been so, diverse, and it's a great story, and definitely a testament to your leadership. How you've learned to work with people. What advice, when you speak at a keynote engagement, what's a typical, if you're giving a keynote on leadership, or what do you want people to take away from that keynote presentation?
Wow, good question. Depending on the specific audience, some things and some themes that resonate across demographics and countries and cultures, I tell people, to be their authentic self, and I know that authenticity and being genuine is a trait that I've tried to make sure I emulate, so that's one. I remind people as they're thinking about their career that they've got to do something that they love. If they're not passionate about it, then they'll likely end up finding themselves faking, and fakes can be spotted miles away. I do practice, and I'm sure that the 9.5 years in Asia helped shape this leadership philosophy. Some people would say I'm a consensus-oriented leader, and I'd argue no. I think there's a difference between consensus and inclusiveness. I want everyone to feel that they're part of the team. That doesn't necessarily mean that I can listen to every point of view or that I wait for a simple majority to decide. But I want everyone to feel that their points of view are heard. And the metaphor that I've often used to reinforce inclusiveness, collaboration, and teamwork is, at one time in my life in Japan, I had an opportunity to be in a dragon boat race. And maybe in Australia, you've seen this sometime. These are these very long, skinny scull boats where you pile about 18 or 20 oversized men or women into it. It's not built for people our size initially, but then somebody at the front of the boat is, hitting the tom-tom or whatever and basically saying, here's the cadence. And I tell people that when these dragon boats start out at a steady state with 20 people in it, the water line is just maybe an inch below the top of the boat. And if we don't get in rhythm fast and well and sequenced, the water can rush over and sink the boat. And I watched. In fact, it was a bunch from either Australia or New Zealand who in the harbor in Hong Kong next to me. Now, I think there may have been some Fosters to blame for that. But
I don't know about that. I wasn't there.
Yes, but I can say that when you do as a team, like this boat, if everybody gets in sequence, if everybody feels included, if everybody understands the rhythm in which they're leading, that boat, I swear, literally begins to elevate and gravitate, and then boom, you start moving with a speed and a swiftness that only others can wish they had. And that is the role that I feel when I'm a leader. Is my job is to get people to get the boat out of the water, to stay in sequence, and feel like, man, I am paddling just as hard as the guy in front of me. And that's the only way it works, because if you get off sequence, you bash your nose in front of the guy's shoulder, and then the whole system breaks down.
Yeah. And you've spoken about creating your personal brand, which is somewhat, obviously you've worked with brands for a long time and worked with all kinds of different products.
Yes.
Tell me about your thoughts on the personal brand and how the similarities between developing. Obviously, you've worked with Pantene, some very large global brands.
Yes.
Tell me how that crosses over to the personal brand and what's important there.
Well, thanks for asking. Yeah, I think that a lot of people do not think of themselves as a brand, and yet I think it's important that at a very early age, whether you're in high school or college, that you do, regardless of whether you go into marketing or not. You can go engineering, you can go IT, you can go, but if you start to think of yourself as a brand, and we've all confronted brand decisions every day at retail, tons and tons of brands. What makes someone pick your brand or this brand of detergent or shampoo or whatever in preference to another? Well, it must have defined itself in a way. There are characteristics of that brand that have become appreciated. So what I tell people is that they need to be conscious about their brand, personal brand. What do they want to stand for? Hopefully it involves integrity and honesty and trustworthiness and all those kind of things, but that's foundational. Then what are you going to do to differentiate your brand over time? And I think the first time that this came to my collective intelligence was when I told my dad at the age of 28, Dad, I have an opportunity to move to Japan as a first-time brand manager. And I was really afraid that he was going to say something like, oh, that's so far away, I don't think you should go. But by contrast, he said, that's awesome, that's fantastic. And I said, really? And he says, yeah. He goes, because P&G is filled with outstanding people. What are you going to do to stand out? And it just hit me. I said, you're basically talking about self-differentiation. He says, absolutely. And this will be your thing. And I think that all of us, when we think of our personal brand, if we become really self-aware, we can then begin to identify and purposefully calculate what we think we can do to ourselves to differentiate and get ahead. But obviously, it goes back to the comment about authenticity. I don't think you can fake your way there. If you're not a very, if you don't have great interpersonal skills, if you don't like that aspect, don't position yourself as the most interpersonal, highly accessible leader. That happens to be a strength of mine. And so I capitalize on that. And now with the Phoenix Suns, I really have an opportunity to exploit those strengths.
Yeah. And obviously you work with P&G, you've worked in marketing, branding. What do you see as some of the biggest trends taking place over the last, say, decade?
Oh, wow.
Why don't we cut it back to in the last 5 years, and what do you see the future? How do you see it evolving?
Well, I still probably 25 years in the industry where branded goods, I've always had preferences for those versus private label. So I don't think that there's probably a gradual shift every year, a slight erosion of the brand giving way to private label. But I don't think that that's the newsworthiness. I think that the last 3 to 5 years, again, it's the diminishing of traditional media like TV, maybe even print and radio. And now I think it's this digital revolution that is just creating an entire new way for people to participate and own your brand. And I think that the digital world, whether it's literally YouTubes and all the texting and everything that allows us to create a relationship. And I'm now at the Phoenix Suns. For the first time in my career, virtually all my revenue is created within a 30-mile radius of where I sit to you today. When you're at P&G or at Dial, you have less than 0.5% of your revenue generated from that 30-mile radius because you're a national or international brand. So it's forced me to think differently about how to market. And we all hear about CRM and customer relationship management. I think that, to me, whether it's a local brand like the Phoenix Suns or a national brand like Pantene, I think the biggest aha is the analytics and the database management around a CRM system that allows you to form a personal relationship which helps people select your brand over the cacophony that's out there.
Yeah, you've definitely got a huge background there, and it's very interesting stories. Well, I really appreciate your time, and we look forward to working with you again. And again, as I mentioned, this is the book, chapter, I believe it's 15, is
I think it's about the middle of the book.
written about Brad, and it's really a great read, and we look forward to working with you and speaking with you again soon.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Michael.
Thanks.
Take care.